You're listening to The Echoes with me, Emily Andrew, the self-development podcast that explores personal stories, powerful tools, and an insight into the wide world of mental, physical, and spiritual health. Get ready to get curious, be inspired, and connect in. This week on the podcast, my guest is Julie Vandermaat, also known as Jules. Jules is a Certified Master EFT Trainer, mentor, and social worker who specialises in training other mental health professionals in trauma-focused emotional freedom techniques, EFT. She's highly regarded in the EFT world for her approach and her experience. And with a background in working as a social worker, she specialised in working with sexual trauma and now uses her years of knowledge to teach EFT to others the slow, safe, and gentle way. In this conversation, we'll be discussing trauma and sexual trauma and how we can use EFT to help reduce symptoms and providing relief. So without further hesitation, here is our conversation. I hope you enjoy it. I am really excited about today's episode, and I'm a little bit nervous as well because I have got someone on the podcast that I hugely respect. Jules, your work is brilliant, and the things that you have to say about the way that we approach EFT and your experience in your field is amazing. So yeah, I'm having a little fangirl moment on the podcast. But for those that haven't come across you and your work, how do you like to describe yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, thank you, Emily. And I'm also excited and having a little fangirl moment because I really like what you do on Instagram. So we're Insta buddies, aren't we? This is our first time we're meeting. So I am, original profession is social worker. So I've been a social worker for about 35 years. And I found EFT when I was working at a sexual assault service locally in Coffs Harbour, where I live in Australia. And I just started doing it really because what I found was that most of the people who I was working with at the sexual assault service, talk therapy wasn't helping, basically, because most people couldn't talk about their sexual trauma. They didn't want to talk about it. They actually couldn't physically talk about it because their throat would jam up, or they would feel so much anxiety they would feel too sick to even come to appointments. So, I just thought, let's try this tapping because it was working well for me and everybody I was doing it with. So I just became kind of obsessed with EFT. And went on to do level 1, level 2, and, repeated and assisted, and then level 3, and then went on to become an advanced practitioner, and then went on to become a trainer, because what I really wanted to do was teach other people who were working with people who had experienced trauma in particular. I wanted to sort of, teach what I had learned from the group of people that I'd been working with. So and so now that's all I do. I don't work with clients one-on-one anymore. Now all I do is training and mentoring of people through the certification process to become certified EFT practitioners. And my kind of niche now is other mental health professionals, like other social workers, psychologists, therapists, allied health professionals, counsellors, that sort of thing. So because I just feel so strongly that the kind of standard way that EFT is taught there's just huge gaps in terms of what, I think what everybody needs to know about trauma and working with trauma, but particularly if you're working with people like I was with known trauma that is significant, I really feel that, we need to be teaching it differently, I guess, than how I was taught anyway.
I think that you being able to see that gap and then fill it, I think, is a really beneficial thing, because we've talked separately, and I think the beauty about EFT is that it is so accessible, but that can also be the kind of the difficult part of it, because there are people that will do the training and may not have a background in counseling or psychology. And, you know, I myself don't have a counseling or psychology degree, but I'm aware of what I'm lacking as a practitioner. So I'm very careful about who I work with. Whereas I think that sometimes some people can almost learn this new skill that they're so excited about, and then feel like they can go out and, you know, work with anybody. So, you know, for people that are interested in EFT, and especially if they're coming at it from a, you know, a background of sexual abuse or trauma, what are the things to look out for in terms of finding the person to hold that space for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing would be, you know, I would be looking for a certified practitioner if I was in that position. But, you know, all certification programs aren't created equally either. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'd be going to the EFT International website and looking for, and also I'd be looking for an advanced certified practitioner if it was me, because that's a person who's been through the process of certification twice. And I guess, yeah, I mean, I would interview the person really myself if I was a client, and just make sure that it feels like a good fit. You know what I mean? Because a person can have all of the right qualifications and might have a good, you know, professional background that is appropriate, but they just you mightn't feel that safe with them. So I think that the actual feeling safe with a person, feeling comfortable with a person is really important. And also, but yeah, I mean, also I'd be asking about particular training around trauma as well, because I think that's important. But in the niche of sexual trauma, what I have found is that, again, even when people are doing EFT, they just tend not to want to actually process old memories. They don't want to actually go there. They don't want to focus on what happened so much. That can just bring up a lot of dysregulation in the nervous system. So I think one of the reasons that I have always had a wait list and a very successful practice is I would reassure people from the very beginning, you never have to talk about it. You know, we never have to go near any of that stuff if you don't want to. And if the hippocampus, the memory center, drops a memory in of something that you feel uncomfortable about, we have techniques of, you know, ways of dealing with that without actually speaking about it. And so, yeah, I would, you know, if I was, I'd be a very well-informed client, wouldn't I? So there'd be lots of things that I'd be looking for, but those are a few of them. I would want to feel reassured that the practitioner understood my aversion to that, and that that's a normal thing. The body doesn't want to re-experience trauma. And the body doesn't need to re-experience traumatic events and memories in order to process them. There's the way that I work and the way I teach people is based around focusing on recent events and future events. And the mind-body intelligence is so sophisticated that it knows that we might be talking about something that hasn't happened yet, a future event, but it uses that event to process the old events. So that's what I've found. And if I was a client, I'd be wanting to work that way because I just know, because I've worked with thousands of mainly women, but also some men, around sexual trauma, that works well. And even that can be challenging, you know, even working on things that haven't happened yet. And that's how we know, right? That's how we know that the body is using this future event or recent event to process an old event, because the person's going, my throat's really tight, or, oh, I feel like I'm going to be sick, or, oh, my head feels like it's going to explode. Like the body is showing us, you know, what's going on here. It's not about something that hasn't happened yet. It's the body is working on an old event that we don't even need to know what it is. That's how smart the system is.
And I think that's so interesting, isn't it? Because especially more recently, you see, especially online, you'll see certain practices where people are screaming and seeming to be very upset, having to really feel it to heal it. And for some people that they want to feel that. Some people want to go, deep and open up wounds and, process it in that quite masculine way. But what and I think some people feel like you need to do that. But what you're saying, which I think is a breath of fresh air, is that doesn't have to be the only way to do it. And actually, for many people, it's okay, and it's okay to be able to do it in a way that is a lot more soft and nurturing and supportive, and you can get just as good results, maybe if not better, in this gentle approach.
Yeah, and you know what I say to people who say you need to, go process those memories and find the original trauma and work on that. People who say that clients want to do that, what I say is clients want to feel better, right? People that I've worked with in this area of sexual trauma are desperate. They have spent thousands of dollars. They've been to many, many different health professionals, told their story again and again and again. Lots of them, not all of them, right? But many of them have been on a long road, a long healing journey, and they are desperate to do anything to feel better. And they hear that EFT is this amazing thing, and you hear that it's quick, so they hear that it's fast, it's effective, and so who doesn't want that, right? But I don't think it means that they want to re-experience trauma, right? What they want is to feel better. And if you gave them the choice, really, would you like to feel better by focusing on the awful things that happened to you and having to re-experience that in your body, or would you like to do that in a gentler, safer way for your nervous system? Nobody would choose to actually, if they knew there was a choice to do it this way or this way, nobody I know would choose to go back and revisit traumas unless they thought that was the only way that they could do it, right? And that's why I have felt sort of brave enough to speak up and say it's not necessary, right? And it doesn't get better results. If it blows up your nervous system, that is not a better result, right? And that's what actually happens. So for a lot of people, and, lots of people who've been trained in that sort of old way of you've got to feel it to heal it, you've got to go back, you've got to, probably think that I'm being a bit, precious, a bit overly cautious. But to me, the job of the practitioner is to assess the level of regulation or dysregulation in their client at every moment, right? And to match the content of the session and the setup statements and the reminder phrases all should match what's happening for their client. But even when, like I have had people who I have done, memory work with, and the session has seemed completely fine, as in, it went in a textbook way. The intensity came down on all aspects, blah, blah, blah. I've been just so happy with how that's been for that person, but it stirred up stuff in the nervous system. The nervous system wasn't ready to do that, or, that the person might then be experiencing more symptoms like flashbacks or, hypervigilance or anxiety or poor sleep. So I think, this is what's, so yes, the session can look like it's gone very well, but then the practitioner doesn't see that person again and wonder why. That certainly happened to me in earlier days. I think I've done the right thing. I think I've done everything by the book. It was a textbook session, but it's just been too much, so the person's gone along with it and they've thought, well, that's what I'm doing, what we have to do. This is what we have to do. But actually, like I tell my mentees, just because you can doesn't mean you should. right? So just because the hippocampus drops the memory of a time that is holding a lot of intensity, just because you can process that memory directly doesn't necessarily mean you should. Anyway, but it's the sort of thing you've got to be, like I said, I just teach my mentees, match your setup statements and your degree of sort of specifics around events and why you feel sad about that now, etc. If that is sort of well matched to the level of regulation in your client, it'll be okay. But just, it's just about being understanding that for the body, for the nervous system, it's a big deal to even speak about things like this, and so, the gentle approach is definitely preferred by people who've experienced that kind of trauma.
So in terms of dysregulation, regulated systems, all of this stuff, for somebody that, doesn't know what a dysregulated system looks like, if somebody has experienced some kind of trauma or sexual trauma, what are the signs that, because they may not necessarily remember what has happened to them, but they may be experiencing the signs of a dysregulated system. What does that look like in people?
Yeah, well, the client shouldn't be having to worry about it, really. It should the practitioner's job. But the practitioner mightn't be aware, right? But anyway, from the client perspective, dysregulation can look like my throat is getting tight, right? And what the person often interprets that as, my body is saying, don't talk about this, right? My body is making it hard for me to talk about this. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this, because they may have spent decades with that belief. You can't talk about this. It's not safe to speak about this. This will cause big trouble in the family. No one's going to believe you, whatever that is, right? So dysregulation is, the throat's getting tight, the chest I can feel my heart beating, my chest feels heavy, or feels sick in the tummy, I feel butterflies in the tummy. So those are the really common areas that the dysregulation will show up in the body. But it might also be, their eyes will sort of change. So they'll start talking fast, because there's a thing called the trauma pull, where I might be trying to keep them from talking. I might be trying to keep them focused on something that hasn't happened yet, right? Like, I've got to go to my uncle's funeral and I'm feeling very anxious because I'm going to see my cousin who sexually abused me when I was a child, right? So I might be trying to keep them focused on the funeral and seeing the cousin, and that is a lot of intensity right there. But their brain, their body will have this sort of trauma pull thing happening where it wants to go to the worst thing, and it might, anyway. So like I said, the client shouldn't have to be worrying about it, but basically it's how comfortable do you feel in your body, right? If your body is feeling uncomfortable, if your body feels like it's sending signals of, this isn't safe to talk about this, or, my back feels, I feel like someone's grabbing me from behind, or, those are all signs of dysregulation. Also, if a person is kind of dissociating, not feeling like I'm not in my body anymore, like I'm here and I'm talking to you, but I feel like I'm spacey, I'm not really, or I'm numb, or I'm frozen, or I'm, so there's all sorts of different ways it can show up. But the main thing is that there's a good relationship with the practitioner, and that you can be reporting what's happening for your body, and the practitioner should know how to handle that and not just let you be feeling, a lot of discomfort in the session, and shouldn't be pushing the body to focus on things that it maybe isn't ready to focus on. Like, I advise my mentees, don't do memory work don't work on childhood events in the first couple of sessions, or even the first 3 sessions. Like, give the body a chance to settle into the process and to trust the practitioner and to trust EFT, and to just see how the body responds to working on things that haven't happened yet or things that only just happened, because that can stir up a lot of stuff in the nervous system for a person. So like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. If a memory drops in the first couple of sessions, then I teach my mentees to educate their clients that might happen, and that's okay, but we can pop that in a container for now, and where would you like to put the container, and we can come back to that. Because it can just be enough for the body to be even talking about it at all in any sense.
In terms of the dysregulated kind of responses as well, that isn't just solely in session, is it? Those kind of things can happen day to day in daily life when certain things get triggered. Definitely. And so I assume that a lot of the work also is about being able to give your clients the tools to be able to help themselves in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I find often I'm just teaching sort of silent tapping, orienting tapping, doing the fingernails, the discrete tapping, the body holds, things like that. Like, I just find that a lot of my clients in the first few sessions, they just don't have the capacity to be learning a new life skill. Like, they can do little things like just silent tapping if they're feeling overwhelmed, but I'm not, it's a nice idea that I'll try and teach them how to do basic EFT in between sessions. But the reality is most people are just way, when they start the work, they are really overwhelmed and struggling with life. And so I've found that a lot of people, it's not until we have a few sessions that they can really learn how to help themselves in a more involved sort of a way. But just being able to pick it up, like, oh, I'm starting to feel really overwhelmed here, I might just try that hold that Jules showed me, or I might just do some silent tapping, or I can just tap on one point, and maybe for some people including a bit of breathing in that is helpful. But so it's really good to be able to teach people. It's very, it's a very empowering process, isn't it, EFT? Because people realize, oh, wow, so I can do this myself. I can help myself. I mean, that's, I think, as a social worker, what I really loved about EFT was being able to show people you can do this at home. You don't need me to feel better. You can. It's, obviously it's better to have a 90-minute session with a highly trained practitioner, is going to help, in a better way. But in between sessions, you can certainly, there's lots of little things you can do to help, calm overwhelm and stress and anxiety in the moment. So it's a huge benefit of EFT.
You mentioned earlier about some of the beliefs from sexual abuse survivors, trauma survivors, people that have experienced that, in terms of it's not safe to speak. If I speak, there may be consequences. Do you find that by focusing on future events, you're able to start to challenge some of that belief programming with that kind of the gentler techniques?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, let's take a really common one, like feeling guilty. Like, people will say, I just feel guilty about everything, right? Like, I feel guilty for buying a cup of coffee. I feel guilty for having someone look after my children. I feel guilty about not going to a friend's birthday party because I'm too overwhelmed, or, I'm too stuck in my PTSD to be able to be with people today. So, we write down, if, like, what I ask people is, what are the thoughts and feelings and sensations in the body that you experience frequently that you want EFT to help you with, right? And so they'll say, well, guilty is one. So we write down, I feel guilty, right? What percentage does that feel true as a percentage? Oh, 90% of the time. Like, I can be triggered to feel guilty about anything. And then another one might be shame, and another one might be worthless, right? I feel worthless. Anything can make me feel worthless. If I invited a friend to go for a walk on Saturday and they said, oh, no, actually, I'm meeting such and such for Pilates, I could feel worthless about that. That could trigger me into a cycle of, she doesn't like me, the other person is more interesting, the other person is better than me, whatever. And so, worthless. So anyway, we write down, I feel shame, I feel worthless. And we get a percentage on all of those different, that would be enough, 3 things to be measuring. And I teach people what I call the banana bread analogy, right? So let's say out of guilty, shame and worthless, which one do you really want to focus on? Oh, well, probably the worthless, actually. Feeling worthless on the daily is ruining my life. So I say, okay, let's say, and I always use my phone as a little prop, let's say this is a whole loaf of banana bread that represents your worthlessness, right? Your capacity to be triggered into feeling worthless. Here's a whole loaf of banana bread. So the way we're going to work on that is I'm going to have you cut off a slice of banana bread, cut the slice into 4 little pieces, right? And then 1 piece of banana bread represents a recent time you felt worthless, or a future time when you know that you will probably be triggered to feel worthless. So can you tell me a recent time? And then they might say, oh, well, yesterday I messaged Emily and said, do you want to go for a walk on Saturday? And she said, oh, no, sorry, I'm going to go to this Pilates class with Claire. And that made me feel worthless, right? She doesn't really like me. She doesn't want to spend time with me. She'd rather be with other people. And so, okay, so thinking about yesterday now, when you messaged Emily to ask, do you want to go for a walk? And she said, no, I'm doing a Pilates class with Claire. How do you feel? Oh, I feel sad. Why do you feel sad? Well, I feel sad that this happens to me, right? That a simple little thing like that can make my body spiral into this pit of worthlessness that I can't get out of for hours, right? And so we would tap on what happened yesterday, you know what I mean? And we just work like that, right? Or what would be the next time you might feel worthless? Well, I've been invited to my in-laws and I've got to bring a cake. Like my mother-in-law asked me to bring a cake for my husband's birthday. And I just feel that makes me feel worthless, you know what I mean? Because I'm not a good cook and they're not going to like what I bring. And so we do these little things and they look like little pieces of banana bread. They look like little insignificant events in a person's life. But these are the things that trigger people, right? So what I teach people is by working in this banana bread analogy sort of way of here's the thing we're focusing on is the worthlessness. And the last time you felt worthless or the next time you're going to feel worthless. And the body mind is so intelligent that when we're focusing on yesterday, how that made me feel worthless, it's working on all the old stuff. It's working on the little neural pathways that have been firing together and wiring together for decades that tell you to feel worthless by, as a result of little things. It's like, I tell people it's like you're working with a filing cabinet and you're saying, okay, mind, body, I'd like to work on this worthlessness file, please. Can you get out that file? And the body goes, yep, which one do we want to work on? And it goes, how about yesterday? Can we work on yesterday, please? And it goes, yep, I've got that here. And all right, so when you're thinking about yesterday, what do you feel? Oh, sad. Where do you feel that? In my heart. What does it feel like? Oh, it's like tightness, and so anyway, it works. So I keep it very kind of structured and very simple and very much about just little things like that. And then, the body mind likes that approach basically, right? Because it feels safe because we're not going anywhere big or scary today. We're just going to do these little events, but there can be a lot of intensity come up. We could do a whole session on, I asked Emily to go for a walk and she said no. We could do a whole 90-minute session on that to bring that sort of worthlessness down, and then the disappointment, and then the sadness, and then the hopelessness, and then, all the different aspects related to that just from that one little recent event. And in the end, the person's like, oh, I feel so calm. And then next week when they come and I say, I feel worthless, what percentage did that feel true? And let's say it was 90% before we did any EFT, they might say 75, right? They might say 80. It doesn't matter. Like what I teach my mentees is if you might get a 10% decrease in that, right? I feel worthless. Every time you do a session, it'll drop 10%, and then it'll drop another 10%, and then it'll drop another 10%. And after you do 3 sessions, instead of being 90, it might be 60. And that's actually, that's a lot of relief, you know. So I teach people we're not about clearing trauma, and we're not about transforming lives. We're about reducing symptoms, providing relief. You know, what I say is those triggers around feeling worthless and shame and guilt, all we're going to try and do, and you're going to have to give me a few sessions to do it. With no one session wonders here. The trigger's going to happen less frequently. The trigger's going to be less intense. And when it does happen, you will hopefully have some idea of how to help yourself, right? So that's the goal, is just reducing the sort of the frequency of the triggers, the symptoms, the severity of them, and helping and having the person feel like, oh, I might just do that body hold. I'm feeling like I feel that worthless feeling. Okay. And the somatic practice is to, you know, like, I'm not trying to push away worthless. I'm like, here it is. A little simple thing happened and I'm feeling worthless, and I might just do some silent tapping, right? And the person kind of realizes that this comes up, but it is less intense, it is happening less frequently, and I know something I can do about it. So that's sort of the goal of the work, is to focus on what's happening now, what's ruining your life now. Well, feeling guilty about buying a cup of coffee, right? Feeling not being present to my children because I'm always in my head and being triggered by all this random stuff. You know, my trauma is interfering with my daily existence, and it means I'm not the mother that I want to be, or I'm not the partner that I want to be. You know what I mean? So that's what people want help with, really, is what's happening now. And we absolutely 100% can do that by focusing on things that just happened and things that haven't happened. And as I said, like, I used to do a 7-session minimum when I was seeing clients, because that people bringing me a lot of big loaves of banana bread, Emily, you know, lifetimes of trauma basically that have left them with huge sort of limiting beliefs and a lot of symptoms and stuff. And, you know, like for some people, that feeling of worthlessness could go from being 90 or 100% before we do anything. And after 6 full EFT sessions, 6 90-minute EFT sessions, it could be, oh, I don't feel worthless at all. I don't need to work on that anymore, right? Look, it did happen last week, but it was very short, you know, and I just did some silent tapping in the bathroom and it just sort of came and went. And other people might need a lot more sessions than that. But, you know, I teach people to have realistic expectations, to set goals that have baby steps. You know, a baby step would be to just have you feeling less triggered in your daily experience, you know, just for those triggers to be not happening as often and not be sort of so big every time. And people are happy with that, you know, because they've tried a lot of other things generally. Yeah.
I feel like a nodding dog for this. So I'm just like, yes. But something I was thinking when you were talking, because I think quite a lot of EFT, obviously, it focuses on the body and being able to identify where we're feeling something in our body and what that feels like and that kind of thing. Do you find with people who struggle with, have gone through sexual abuse, do you find there is a disconnection, and is there sometimes a period of having to understand what the body is saying and making the body it feel safe to be in your body again? Because I know that can happen quite often with eating disorders and things like that, and I'm just wondering if there is that to sometimes have to navigate with people who struggle.
Yeah, so I mean, what I find, the way I teach EFT, with my mentees, I say no tapping on the first date. right? So your job with the first session is you're going to educate your client about nervous system dysregulation, about EFT, how EFT works, why EFT works. You're going to help them. You're going to have them so well prepared that when, and you're going to be setting some goals and doing some assessment, and you're going to be listening about the problem, right? And really, how's this showing up for you? How's it affecting you? And the only tapping you'll be doing, if any, is you're going to show them silent tapping. So, you can show them where the points are. You might show them orienting tapping. You might show them a bit of tap and rant if they look pretty regulated, right? But the goal of that first session is to help the body understand, I know this is a big deal for you, right? So I'm not going to go, like if I went on a date with a person and we hadn't known each other very long and they lunged at me and started pawing at my part and kissing me, and I'd be like, what? I didn't say you could do that, and what I sort of teach people is EFT is the same, right? It's working with the body. So we don't go poking around people's emotional holes and private things when we've just met them. I just don't agree with that, right? So anyway, so I teach, it's about, we're building safety, we're building trust, we're building rapport. And we're setting a little goal, and we're really making sure the person feels heard by us, right? And they understand the job of EFT and what it is. And so if then we come to the first session and we go to work on the worthlessness and they say, I don't feel anything in my body, that's okay. It doesn't matter, right? Like it's neither here nor there. What are your thoughts about it? Oh, well, now I'm worried that EFT won't work for me because I'm not feeling anything in the body, and you've got to feel things in the body, don't you? No, you don't actually, right? So we might do some rounds we might just sneak up on that, even though I feel worried. And then they might start feeling stuff, because we are tuning into it. But, I tend to find with my niche, it's more the opposite, right? They feel, whoa, it's big, big, big. The minute we start tapping, the minute we start talking, often the intensity is really high. So I'm a bit more used to that than people that say, I'm not feeling anything. But either way, it's okay. That's part of the psychoeducation that the practitioner ought to provide. If you're not feeling anything in the body, it's okay. We'll just go with the thoughts and the feelings, right? Because EFT is, it's exposure therapy. So that's the focus on the negative, even though I feel anxious thinking about going to my uncle's funeral, and that's the cognitive therapy side of it. Well, the thoughts are, what if my cousin's there? I'm really afraid to see him. And then the somatic element is, where are you feeling that in your body, right? Oh, well, and it might be butterflies in my tummy and my chest is pounding, or it might be nothing. I don't feel anything when I think about that now. That's okay. Whatever, it's all normal for you. And I find that people that start off with not much feeling, sometimes it comes in after a few sessions. Do you know what I mean? As the body settles down and kind of realizes that this is a safe modality, the body might kind of join in. But, I've had people that really, they don't feel much in the body at all and it still works. And then there's other people who go into that kind of freeze, dissociation, feeling very shut down. I can't access any feeling. And still, we just work with that. It's not, so we're just working with whatever the body is showing us now, and the EFT will usually just turn down whatever is present that's not feeling comfortable. You know what I mean? So, and the somatic practice is the asking the body, where are you feeling that anxiety? Oh, in my stomach, in my chest. But if the body doesn't have anything to report on that, then we just move along. And even though I feel anxious thinking about going to my uncle's funeral tomorrow because I'm frightened of seeing my cousin. And that's just where I'm at. So it's all part of the education, that I don't know what your body's going to do when I tap with you. Like, some people have a lot of stuff come up and other people not so much, and other people it really varies from session to session. So it's just sort of, the education piece is really important, because education leads to increased regulation. right? If people understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and what to expect. Okay, so she said I mightn't feel much in the first few sessions. She said not to worry about that. Oh, she said a memory might come in, right? Well, she said I might start feeling things very strongly in my body. That's what's happening. So she said that would happen, so that's okay, right? I just need to tell her. So it's all about pre-framing and preparing people that helps the body kind of go like, oh God, good. She understands this is a big deal for me, right? She gets it. That's okay. All right, I'm going to cooperate with this process because I feel like she understands, you know?
Mm.
Whereas I don't know about you, but I've had the odd EFT session myself where I've thought, you don't actually know me. You don't know anything about me. You're using words I didn't say. Like it can be very disorienting if the person isn't attuned and hasn't spent that time, I think, given the body that, realizing that the body is listening every minute, right? Every cell of the body is listening every minute, and it's tuning in, and do you understand this is a big deal for me or not? Because if you don't, I'm not going to play. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think
I'm going to make this hard for you, right? I'm going to shut things down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's something that people can internalize, if they have that response, if somebody who's been through kind of that trauma, they may be like, oh, it's my problem, it's something I'm doing wrong. And actually, I think being able to give people the permission to understand that it's not their fault, it's not something that they are doing wrong, is a really important piece, because we so often will just turn around and be like, oh, well, it's me then. It must be me.
Oh, absolutely. And that is something that, I'd say a massive percentage of my clients would say, I'm broken, right? I'm the problem here. So if the EFT didn't work, it's my fault, right? And they won't tell you that, because they, like you say, they internalize everything. They're so used, that's so normal for them. Oh, this doesn't work either for me. My body can't, I can't do this properly either, right? I'm not being a good client because either my body's not participating or it's too much, what's happening for me. I'm too much. Like that's a really big one for a lot of my clients. I'm too much. I'm too much for a relationship. I'm too much for my family. I'm too much for people at work. Like everywhere I go, I'm too much. So I'm also going to be too much for this person who's doing EFT with me. And then often if that sort of education piece isn't done well, if the safety and trust isn't done well, and sometimes even when that is all done well, they can feel like, oh, I'm being too much. My body's having this big reaction, and this EFT practitioner is either like there with me and is like a life raft in a rough ocean, like that's what I remember when I first started doing EFT. The people, like their eyes would be like, oh, like this is scary. Being in my body is scary, right? Like even we haven't even talked about anything, but just being here with the intention of talking to you about this, people look very, it's an intense process for a lot of people. So I had to really learn very early on, how am I going to modify this process to help people who have so much, stored survival stress that is very easily stirred up without even talking about anything, So, and the practitioner has to be calm, right? Like I have to be a life raft in the rough ocean. I have to be, I'm right here with you. Just keep tapping, keeping your eyes open. Just keep tapping. Feet on the floor, like just bringing them back, orienting them back to that present moment. And yeah, but it's not fun, that this kind of work is, like it does get good results, but even when it's managed really, really well, it can be very challenging. And I just feel like there's not enough talk about that. You know what I mean? There's all this sort of talk about EFTs, this like quick fix, and you see people doing all this kind of positive tapping on Instagram and stuff. And I just think that's actually not EFT. Sorry, it's not clinical EFT. And my mentees will say, oh, the clients have said, oh, I've tried tapping, that doesn't work. But what they've tried is positive. I am safe, I am calm, I choose to be motivated. They're not, anyway, people are teaching themselves on TikTok. That's how desperate they are to feel better. But what they're seeing on, what I call social media tapping is not clinical EFT. So they're worlds apart, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's something that whenever I do workshops and things, I always mention, because there is a lot of, EFT got a big bump when I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here was on, and Boy George was in the jungle and doing his, I am calm, I am safe, and that kind of thing. So there was a huge surge in, what's this tapping thing? And I think, people had this idea of, it's just saying positive affirmations and tapping on points of your face. And I think it's really important to make that difference, because there is a place for positive tapping, but that is not clinical EFT. And I think the reason, obviously, why there isn't much clinical EFT on social media is because as practitioners, we have to keep people safe. It's not going to be helpful for us to be putting necessarily videos out there that are going into quite big topics and doing it how we would with a client, or even if it's in the gentlest way, that might trigger somebody. There's a level of responsibility where I think that it is safer to put something that is a bit more positively led on social media, but to make the distinction of, this is not kind of clinical EFT, this is general, this isn't specific, this, all of these points. And I think that's where it's it's putting something out there so people can hear about it, but being able to put make the distinguish kind of the change. And I think as somebody, I post a lot on social media in terms of EFT and tapping and stuff, so it's always something I'm quite conscious of, trying to make sure that I'm putting information out there, but also keeping people that are watching my videos safe. It's a hard one, I think.
That's right. And I, because I'm a trainer, like, I've produced a little series of videos working with people who are pretty regulated humans, and just showing this is what a whole session looks like. Like working on a particular goal, like something to do with money or something to do with a business or whatever, just to show people this is what clinical EFT looks like. Because I think, and like I said, it's not working on any big trauma stuff. But memories come up in the sessions and that sort of thing. But I think we just got to keep making that distinction. And I mean, if it's good if people are interested in EFT, and if people, like, the thing is, when people are doing positive tapping, I'm like, it's not, I don't think it's the affirmations that are working, it's the tapping. And if you just did silent tapping, it'd be just as beneficial, I think. If all you did was silent tapping when you feel a bit overwhelmed, that would help. You don't have to say, I feel safe, I am calm. Anyway, I'm the same. I just try and send the message that if you're tapping on a point and you're saying a negative word about how you're feeling, it'll help. Anxious, feeling anxious, anxious in my tummy, anxious in my tummy. Like, just keep it simple. But swap the positives for just one negative word about the feeling and perhaps where it is in the body. Anxious in my tummy, feeling anxious in my tummy. That will get a better result. Anyway.
Yeah, because it's the
any
truth,
tapping's better than no tapping, isn't it? That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And I don't understand, if you're feeling anxious, I don't understand, like, why we would say I feel safe, because we're tapping and we want to say the thing we want to turn down, right? So if we're feeling anxious, we should be saying I feel anxious, because we want to turn down the anxious feeling. Whereas if we say I feel safe, anyway, it doesn't make sense to me. But that's because we understand clinical EFT, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I could talk to you forever, and I'm so grateful that you came on, and I just really appreciate you and all the work that you do. If people are interested in training to be an EFT practitioner and they wanted to come to you or give us all the information, everything that we need to know in terms of working with you and all your kind of details.
Yeah, so my Instagram is just Tapping with Jules, and my website is just tappingwithjules.com. So that you just send me a message, send me an email via the website, and I'll get back to you. I mean, I'm in Australian time zone, so it's probably not very UK friendly. Like, there's a few people in the UK who say they want to train with me, but unfortunately it would be night times for them. But some people, you know, I mean, I used to be up in all hours of the night, in the middle of the night actually, to train to do my advanced certification and to be a trainer. Like me and my colleague Katie, we'd be up in the middle of the night doing it because that's how much we loved it. But everybody's not. Everybody's not like that. So that's all you need to know.
As an EFT practitioner myself, I found this conversation really interesting. And I think that the beauty of EFT is that it is so adaptable for people no matter what they're using it for. So whether you're using it to help with money blocks or something that may not have extreme emotional distress, or if you are using it to help you to overcome PTSD, trauma, sexual trauma, there is a route and a way for you. But being able to have this conversation and share it with you, I think, is a really special thing. So I'm so grateful that Jules came on. As always, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you found it useful, then please give the podcast a like, a review, share it with somebody that you love, because those small actions can make such a big difference in getting conversations like this out there and helping even more people. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you tuning in every week. I hope wherever you are, you have a wonderful week, and I will see you again really soon.